Thank you very much, and good morning all, and welcome to the Public Safety work session on the FY22 operating budget and FY21 through 26 CIP amendments. This is a committee discussion, and the members of the committee are President Hucker and Vice President Albernaz, and we're very pleased to be joined by Councilmember Jawando, who many times, thank goodness, has joined us as well. So. And with that, unless my colleagues have anything to say, we have a little bit to go through on this packet. And Ms. Farag, once again, has done an outstanding job. So we're going to turn to her. I did want to note that we're going to have join us, or I believe have already joined. You can't always tell from a Zoom meeting, but I know that Chief Marcus Jones is here. Assistant Chief Tom Didone is supposed to join us from the Field Service Bureau. Assistant Chief Willie Parker Loan from the Patrol Service Bureau. Assistant Chief Dinesh Patel from the Investigations Bureau. Acting Chief Darren Frank from Management Services Bureau. Wade Holland from the Vision Zero Program Coordinator, who is the Vision Zero Program Coordinator. Neil Shorb, the Budget Manager from Montgomery County Police Department, and Taman Morris, who's the Office of Management and Budget. And if I missed anybody, please let me know. And with that, do any of my colleagues have anything to say before we turn to Ms. Farag? No? Okay. Well, Ms. Farag, you are up, please.
Good morning, everybody. Today is the one item we have today is the police operating budget, and there is one CIP amendment to go over to, although that's pretty technical in its changes. I apologize in advance for the extraordinarily long staff report, but I wanted to put down a lot of background information and flesh out a little bit more what the county is already doing, right? Both the county executive and the council have already been advancing racial equity initiatives in the arena of public safety. So this year's budget is about a $1.7 million increase from last year. That's about a 0.6% increase from last year's continuity of services budget of $281 million. I've got the regular budget charts for you to look at, pages 2 and 3. On page 2 are the changes that have service impacts, and there are a lot of significant changes in this budget that have service impacts on the delivery of public safety. Page 3 has the identified same services adjustments. Those are delivering the same services, just either some of them cost more or some of them cost less. The service impacts reduce expenditures by about $4 million. The identified same service adjustments net out to about $5.5 million. Contained within that, I just wanted to point out 2 compensation adjustments, one to annualize wage increases for this year and one to reflect the wage increase for next year, and that's about $9 million. I've done this packet differently than years prior to reflect the racial equity and social justice work that the county has been doing as a whole, and also to reflect all of the police reform initiatives that have been going on. And I've listed on pages 3 and 4 the different initiatives that are currently underway. I did want to highlight for the committee that, as you know, the county executive has retained Effective Law Enforcement for All as a consultant who's currently conducting a comprehensive audit of the police department. And part of that audit will assess the size and the structure of the department as it relates to the efficiency of operations and community need. Their preliminary findings have been pushed out a little bit. They were originally due this spring. They're expected now sometime early this summer. And while it hasn't really been discussed in detail, at least not publicly here, the chief is also implementing a departmental reorganization that will better align his public safety service delivery to meet the county's goals of safer neighborhoods. And so when I took my racial equity approach on this budget, I recognize that there are different ways to advance racial equity and social justice within policing. And I also wanted to recognize the fact that the county is facing ongoing fiscal constraints due to, revenue reductions due to COVID and other things, other pressures. And so the changes or the recommendations I've made in this are based on evidence-based practices that have demonstrated statistically significant outcomes, both for safer policing and for promoting racial equity. As I looked through the budget and all of its different functions. And so my 2 main policy objectives here were making policing safer for everybody and advancing racial equity and social justice aspects of the department's work. As I mentioned before, the county is already doing a lot of work to advance racial equity initiatives, and I wanted to highly stressed that data is a foundational element of any sort of meaningful police reform. And as I know, one police equity expert has noted that our nation has not measured public safety well, and that lack of data makes it difficult to effectively move to community-centered systems of public safety. And to address this challenge, the council's currently considered amendments to Bill 4520, which is amendments to the community policing law, and that will enhance public safety data collection, analysis, and reporting. Just briefly, the bill requires collecting demographic data on every police stop and posting data about specified types of encounters on Data Montgomery for public view. The timeline for this bill, the Public Safety Committee is expected to hold another work session on it after sine die, which just concluded Monday at the State General Assembly level, so that any state reforms that were adopted could be taken into consideration, whether or not they have impact on this bill or not. The department itself is currently in the middle of its procurement for a new records management system, and that'll facilitate much of the data collection and analysis that policymakers need as they consider improvements to delivering the public safety services to the community. Their current record management system, I wanted to point out, Ejustice, is a very old system acquired in 2004. It had an expected lifespan of about 9 years. It's been stabilized. It's very unwieldy and inefficient for meeting its current data reporting needs, particularly when reporting information to the FBI in the NIBR system. So I'm just recommending to the committee prioritizing these data collection efforts and analysis and supporting any related staff and resources that might be necessary to implement that initiative. And I will discuss the IT positions that are changed in the budget down below in the staffing element. So staffing analysis starts on page 5. It's obviously been at the forefront of many police reform discussions as communities are trying to grapple what professional, safe, and racially equitable policing should look like. And there have been different changes going on. The council and the county executive have been looking at providing alternate public responses to community problems, right? Now, there's been a lot of focus in mental health. Police officers already get crisis intervention training and they get mental health first aid, and that is a very helpful skill set for police officers to have when they're responding to a variety of different types of calls. But a police officer still may not necessarily be the best government response to a community problem. And to that end, county government's been looking at increasing a mental health response, and the council last year added 6 mental health counselors to the crisis intervention unit. The mobile crisis team over in HHS, and the county executive's FY22 recommended budget continues those positions into the next year. The council and the county executive are also looking at different delivery models that are based on ones like the CAhoots service in Eugene, Oregon, and they're also continuing to look at a restoration center, which could help deflect individuals from arrest and better address underlying mental health or substance abuse needs. I just wanted to point out that despite these initiatives, police still remain tasked with responding to calls. And I'm not saying don't move forward, we absolutely have to move forward, but they may be overlapping initiatives. I mean, for example, when we make changes to the public safety framework that might be helpful to reduce racial inequities, those changes themselves don't always create a reduction in the need for police. And the example I laid out on 5 and 6 is decriminalizing marijuana helps reduce the number of minor drug arrests, but it hasn't reduced the calls for service that police need to respond to the extent where we can identify associated police staffing that can be reduced. And at this point, I'm just, for the council's consideration, it might be premature to reduce police staffing based on the understanding that you are still increasing mental health responses. They might have to overlap a little bit until we can understand exactly what type of impact the mental health responses have.
One second. And I think that's a conversation that we're going to have during this entire discussion on a variety of topics, because we have the reports that are coming back. We have everything that we know that there's going to be changes from what is going to be suggested. We don't know what's going to be suggested, but we all know that there's going to be changes. But there's an interim that we have to continue to figure out what we're doing, how we're doing it, which has to be funded regardless of who's doing it, and to get to the place where the next way it's being done is also funded. As an example, for CAhoots, I would assume that, well, I don't know whether CAhoots would be funded through the public safety budget, or we have Vice President Albernaz here, who's the chair of the HHS committee, whether that would be funded through the HHS committee. I don't know how that's going to work, but we have to make certain that the people who are being served and need to be served are going to be served. So that needs to be an ongoing discussion. We're talking about money at this point. We're not talking about how we're actually going to provide the service in some cases. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in on that topic, but that's something that needs to be. Yes, Vice President Albernaz.
Yeah, thank you for that point. I didn't know when I was going to make it, but might as well make it now. So obviously, this discussion is not in a vacuum. Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Reamer proposed the addition of positions that are specifically, as one example, intended to help address mental health concerns. There is an ongoing discussion about ensuring a higher degree of mental health specialists as we transition through the school resource officer program. Councilmember Hucker and I proposed the addition of 6 additional social workers within each of, and was obviously supported unanimously by the council in each of the unique police districts, which is expanding our crisis intervention response. So there are budget line items that are directly related to the discussion we'll be having this morning and this reimagining police work that are in HHS's budget. And there's actually a net increase in HHS's budget that is significant, especially within the context and construct of the challenges before us economically. And so I just wanted to reinforce that point, Mr. Chairman, because there are other investments in other areas that won't be discussed today, but are directly related.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Please, Susan, continue. Please.
So the recommended staffing changes are outlined on page 6. The department currently has an authorized sworn complement of 1,306 officers. The recommended budget abolishes 27 of those sworn positions. They are the same 27 positions that had been proposed for abolishment in round 1 of the FY21 savings plan last July. After reviewing that savings plan last summer, the council did not eliminate the positions, but instead directed the department to achieve the same savings by taking laps. At the time that these cuts were considered, they were considered primarily to achieve savings related to the deep dive in revenues that we experienced after the COVID impact. And the department tried to spread it across the department so it wouldn't hurt as much in any particular area. But these changes didn't necessarily have any nexus to racial equity or police reform at the time. Police reform was just starting up in the county, and we had not heard back in any formal way from some of the community advocates, like for the task force to reimagine public safety. The net change here would be a reduction of 25 sworn officers and 6 civilian positions. I did want to point out that 2 sergeants are being civilianized here. That's actually already happened. So the work's not going away. It's just the person who's doing it changes, and it costs less money to have a civilian do it than a sworn officer. And then the budget's also adding 2 sergeants to the Internal Affairs Division, which we will discuss shortly too. So I understand, and I go through this, that I understand there are conflicting opinions about what is the appropriate size of a police department. And there's been ongoing debate for years whether or not the department staffing should be increased to address the county's public safety needs. It has a lower officer per capita ratio than most similarly sized jurisdictions, and the committee had that discussion back in February on staffing, recruitment, retention, and those ongoing problems that the department's having. And it's not unique to Montgomery County; it's all across the nation. And some advocates more recently have called for reducing the size of the department. And again, I just wanted to point out ELE Frey is expected to release its preliminary findings for its police department audit sometime in the early summer. And it remains unclear at this point if those findings will recommend any particular staffing changes to the staffing levels. They might want increases, they might want reductions, they might want shifting from one function to another. I don't know. So these proposed budget cuts do have service impacts, and I went through them to see what impact they had on racial equity and safer policing for everybody. And so the primary discussion today is traffic positions, the 5 long pages I'm going to go through. The proposed budget is recommending a reduction of 9 traffic positions. 8 of those are enforcement. 1 is a collision reconstruction unit police officer. The savings there, and OMB Taman pointed out for me, I thought the savings was $1 million, but there are additional operational costs that increase that number to about $1.28 million. These staff reductions would occur concurrently with the departmental reorganization, which is outlined briefly on Circle 18. And part of that is, a big part of this reorganization is to centralize traffic enforcement. This would give more supervisory oversight and consistency in the way traffic enforcement goes, and it'll help it be better flexible to engage in data-driven areas to conduct the high visibility traffic enforcement. And it creates 2 traffic teams, centralized traffic teams, 1 for day work and 1 for evening. And each one would be comprised of 2 sergeants, 2 corporals, and 12 police officers. So this reduction reduces those units by 1 police officer each. And it also reduces 6 district traffic complaint officers, which I'll get to briefly. That leaves 1 district traffic complaint officer each in each district, except for 2D, which is Bethesda, and they'll still have 2. When I saw this, I initially had some concerns about traffic enforcement and how that might impact the county's longstanding commitment to Vision Zero efforts to eliminate serious and fatal collisions by 2030. And it was important to look and see whether or not that type of service reduction was going to have more of an impact on communities of color who are actually disproportionately the victims of serious and fatal traffic accidents in the county. And so to illustrate that point, I took the pedestrian crash heat map off of Data Montgomery and I asked somebody better than me at GIS to please overlay that with COG's equity emphasis area map. And those, it's hard to see in black and white, which I have before me, but they align pretty closely, those areas. And so it seems that I didn't really have to do this work, this racial equity work, because Vision Zero has already done it. In their 2017 2-year plan, as stated on page 8, they indicated that communities with higher rates of poverty, persons of color, and younger residents have higher collision rates in the county. And to address that inequity, the county prioritizes its resources to invest in the communities most affected by the traffic collisions and proactively engage with community members to address these concerns. I go a little bit into how they're layering their approaches. That includes engineering, enforcement, and education. And as you know, again, I understand traffic enforcement has been one of the topics of debate in police reform this entire past year and before that. And it's well known that racial disparities are pervasive in police traffic stop data. And the OLO report from 2020 on local policing data and best practices explicitly points out those disparities. Black or African American men are 3 times as likely to receive any sort of traffic violation than white men are. Disparities then further exist for the numbers of citations written at a particular stop, as well as for how many searches and arrests stem from those stops. Again, that's not unique to Montgomery County, that's all across the nation, and it's been going on for decades, really. So consequently, many advocates have called for reducing the number of police, shifting traffic enforcement to a different department, and other methods of attempting to address these racial disparities in traffic stops. And I strongly agree that these racial disparities have to be addressed and they have to be reduced. And, you know, of course, ideally they'd be eliminated. I disagree, however, that actually reducing the number of police will have any direct impact on the racial disparities in traffic stops. It reduces the number of police, it might reduce the number of traffic stops, but it doesn't do anything to actually address what systems are having the impact that contribute to those actual disparities. So I was also concerned, you know, the OLO report provides this necessary baseline data to perform additional analysis, and we have to understand that there are broader reasons why these racial disparities might exist than just a particular police officer at a particular traffic stop. You know, they could be being dispatched or deployed to places with higher crash rates, higher crime rates, higher different income levels. And then there's systemic confounding factors, such as the traffic laws that Maryland has, which in my opinion should be looked at soup to nuts and trying to figure out how they really address a modern community that we have now and deal with racial disparities. But there are also things like departmental policies and protocols, that those departmental policies and protocols are the things that can actually change police behavior. If you deploy them in different ways for different objectives, you're changing the police behavior that may be contributing to the racial disparities. So, you know, I was concerned that a reduction in enforcement might have a negative impact on driver and pedestrian safety outcomes. And page 9 is a chart that illustrates calendar year fatal summary totals. And as you know, during the pandemic, the police department pulled back on enforcement, and that was primarily due to the need to socially distance, as well as allow some medically high-risk staff to telework or be assigned to alternate duties that weren't front-facing. And during 2020, traffic fatalities increased by almost 25%. And that is especially significant given that there was such a drop in traffic volume during the same time period. When asked, the police department indicated that drivers that were involved in these were speeding more, they were less apt to be using seatbelts, and they were more likely to be driving while impaired. And so that brings up, which I think as the county works through its racial equity work and advancing advancing racial equity in general, we're going to find that one policy change over here might have an unintended impact over here. So we have racial disparities both in the people who are experiencing the serious injuries and the fatalities, but we also have racial disparities in the traffic stops. So how do we move forward and try to reduce the disparities in both? How do you advance public safety and reduce racial disparities? Well, Vision Zero, taking a recommendation from their equity task force in 2019, recommended that the police department focus on the 5. I believe that program is in San Francisco, and implement a change in its traffic enforcement to go after high visibility enforcement that prioritizes the most dangerous types of driving behaviors. Yes, it was in San Francisco, similar to a program in San Francisco. Go after the ones where people really risk hurting other people's or hurting themselves, right? Don't go after the expired tags or the busted out tail light, or at least not, they should be de-emphasized in this point. Go after what actually causes injury and fatalities. And this approach is actually similar to one that I found in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There's a study that's been conducted where reprioritization of these traffic stops specifically to focus on the safety help police to both increase safer roads and reduce racial disparities in traffic stops. They increased their total safety stops by 121% during that study period. Consequently, traffic fatalities went down 28%, traffic injuries went down 23%, all crashes, regardless whether there was an injury or not, went down 13%. So they had really improved public safety outcomes. Racial disparities also changed. The percentage of stopping Black drivers fell by 7%, and the ratio of the disparity between Black and white stops reduced 21% as well. So the department's already doing it. They implemented it in 2020, but it's district-based. It's not centralized. The centralized traffic will actually help them do this better. And I also listed some community feedback on pages 10 and 11 about the traffic program, which engages in automated traffic enforcement, shifting it to other departments, reducing policing, as well as fleshed out a little bit about what Vision Zero Equity Task Force members were looking at, which are primarily community members. And they recognized the disparity in traffic stops too, and still thought that there should be an enforcement framework, but they wanted that framework to minimize the disparate impacts on drivers and pedestrians of color. And while it was not specifically addressing racial equity, the Task Force to Reimagine Public Safety's community survey, which is on page 11, indicated that the majority of respondents think that the police department should continue to take the lead in traffic enforcement. I do want to note, however, that was an informal survey and about 6,500 residents responded. I go a little bit through automated traffic enforcement, and as you know, there's an active RFP solicitation underway for a new contract. It's not reflected in the FY22 budget because right now additional funding and revenues are unknown. There are many variables that could change with the new contract: fee structure, the scope of the expansion they want to do, and staff workload. And I just noted that there are the ATAU is an effective tool in several ways, but it does have some limitations. The speed cameras can't be installed on roads with speed limits over 35 miles an hour, and that's a state law. Yet most severe injuries here in the county, they are experienced on roadways that have higher speed limits. So they wouldn't necessarily get to the nexus of the fatality and injury issue. Speed cameras and red light cameras can only capture very limited types of violation. They don't address things like improper left turns, driving on the shoulder, reckless driving, and other types of high-risk traffic violations that actually contribute to injury and death. And then I just wanted to note, because there seem to be some misconceptions out there about whether or not the disparities in traffic stops matches the disparities in speed camera tickets and red light camera tickets. We don't know, right? Because citations in the automated traffic enforcement unit are issued against the owner of the vehicles, not the driver of the vehicles. Those could be two very different things. And I don't think that the racial data, gender data are recorded as far as who owns a vehicle. I know it's on people's driver's license, but it's not necessarily on their registration. So at this point, it's very difficult to track that as far as citation issuance is concerned. For these reasons, and as I said, there might be unintended consequences to trying to reduce racial disparities in one area. The Government Alliance on Racial Equity says, ask some questions about your policy. Who benefits? Who is hurt by it? What are the possible unintended consequences? And what have you done to try to mitigate those unintended consequences? And as I said before, as we move forward on this work, we might see, an impact in one area might have a better impact in another, it might have a worse impact in another. So my mitigation strategy here is to balance and try to improve racial disparity outcomes in both traffic safety and the traffic enforcement stops. And for those reasons, in order to continue to move forward with Vision Zero goals of reducing severe and fatal traffic crashes that are disproportionately injuring people of color in this community, I'm recommending that the traffic positions be restored so that these teams can be fully staffed and work towards those goals. Understanding that with their new reprioritization of the way they stop people, if it works the same way as it worked in Fayetteville, North Carolina, we should see a reduction in racial disparities in the traffic stops as well. And if the committee and then the council adopts this recommendation, I think the council should follow up on this issue later in the fall to track the progress made in both goals.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Giwando, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to everybody. And it's great to join you as always. I think I've earned my associate membership of the Public Safety Committee.
Yeah, that's right.
And thank you, Ms. Farag, for the report. So just a few things. And I want to make a couple points here so that I don't have to do it in the rest of the budget. So I won't be with you the whole day, but I think this is a perfect one to make the point, several points on. On Sunday, Deonte Wright was killed in Brooklyn Heights as a result or from a traffic stop dealing with expired registration tab and a car freshener supposedly hanging down. He was shot. The officer said they were reaching for the taser, thought they were, and killed him in the car. It's the latest tragic example of what happens when we don't have the right systems in place, the right policies in place, the right budget priorities in place to protect life. And as was mentioned, that's an extreme example, but unfortunately, 11% of all police-involved deaths are a result of in traffic stop. That was a 2015 number from the Washington Post. And they're disproportionately people of color, disproportionately Black people, obviously. And that's extreme example. You have many other examples. And I had asked the OLO to commission a report, which Susan Farag cited here, about the disparities we have in Montgomery County. Black men 3 times more likely to be pulled over, 7 times more likely to be pulled over in Bethesda as a Black person. And given many higher tickets, right? So you have a whole range of bad outcomes from the loss of trust and just not feeling protected and safe or treated equally, all the way to death that have been happening for years. And I think we all know this is horrible, and we agree that it's really bad. With this Deonte Wright episode really hit me hard because I was pulled over just about 6 months ago for expired registration tabs. And actually in contravention of an order from Governor Hogan, which is still in effect, I believe, that said that police statewide shouldn't be doing that because of the MVA and the status of the pandemic. And I was again asked, is this car stolen, or do you have any outstanding warrants? And I say that to say, don't feel sorry for me. I lift up these stories. And I want to also track back 20 years. 20 years ago, and put this up to the camera, I worked as a Montgomery County AmeriCorps member. This is my ID. There you go. You can see it now. It's a little faded. I'm a little younger. My hair is a little more curly and more full. That year, I put this ID card in front of my license, because that year I was pulled over. I was 18 years old. I was pulled over more than 10 times by Montgomery County police officers. And I kept this in front because about half of those times when I pulled this out first with the badge on it and Charles Moose's signature and my picture, I was allowed to go on without any issues. And I say that to say, because there are so many people in our county, in our state, in our country that are dealing with this every day, that have sat on curbs for 2 hours while their cars are rummaged through and nothing happens and then let go, that are dealing with this in a really, really significant way. And our data bill that this committee, I appreciate all of you have co-sponsored, we're working together on, will help track some of these disparities even deeper and give us more information. But we have an opportunity right now, I think, in this budget, in a very small way, to make a statement that we are going to put our money where our mouth is, to do all the other things that we're doing, but also try to focus in our police department on the things that are most important. We do not have to choose. I think it's a false choice, rather, to put Vision Zero against reducing very slightly the budget in the traffic enforcement division. Obviously, this is an overall increase in the police budget, but a very small reduction in the traffic division. Because the point that when you have reduced staff, and one of my overarching goals in police reform that I've said before, and I'll continue to say, is we need a smaller, more highly trained, more focused police department. And I believe that passionately. And this is an example. When you have a small staff, and all of our staffs will know this, you have to prioritize. It forces you to prioritize the things that are most critical to safety and to protecting our residents. And I think that is a critical component of this discussion. We want people to focus. We want our police department to be focused on the most violent, the crimes, the most violent crimes. And then if they are involved in traffic, hit and runs, DUIs, the things that are most at risk for our public. Councilmember Reamer, and I've supported this, OLO is currently studying how we might move traffic enforcement to DOT, the Department of Transportation. That's in progress. The city of Berkeley, California has done this, has passed a law to do this. DC moved the automated traffic enforcement to a different division. This is happening around the country. There's been a lot of scholars that have written about, if you take law enforcement out of traffic enforcement, you remove and use, for example, unarmed transportation monitors. You have to, a lot of details you'd have to figure out, but that you would take the crime enforcement part out of that. So that what happened to Deonte Wright, what's happened to so many others, it's just about traffic. It's just about saving lives, and they're just issuing citations. They have no other power. And I think there are ways to do this. And is it new? Sure. Have we done it before? No. But the severity and the significance of this moment calls on us to do things differently. And I think this is a very small opportunity to send a message that we are interested in doing things differently, that we do not accept that Black residents in Bethesda can be pulled over 7 times more often and issued 5 to 6 more tickets. We don't accept those outcomes for any of our residents. And I think by forcing prioritization, this is a step to do that. So the last thing I just wanted to say, the Reimagining Policing Task Force, and I believe the Police Advisory Commission, I'm not 100% sure, but I know the Reimagining Task Force was mentioned. They recommend moving traffic enforcement out of the police department. And the last thing I'll say on Vision Zero, disparities in traffic stops are far greater than disparities in pedestrian fatalities, which are also unacceptable. And I'm not saying it's not a choice between one or the other. I think we can do both. And I think this will send a strong message that we're trying to do both. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't have a vote, but I would suggest that this committee, and I'll certainly argue with full council, that we retain the county executive's recommendations to reduce very slightly the traffic division's allotment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Vice President Albornoz.
Thanks. As always, I really appreciate Councilmember Joando's perspective. I know, obviously, he's really immersed himself over his entire professional career in these issues, and I have a great deal of respect for that. And I don't have those same shared personal experiences, which are real and raw, and we've been talking about very intensely over the last year and beyond. And even before George Floyd, there were already steps being taken by this council to address some of these sort of systemic issues that are complex and have a lot of layers. And I agree with so much of what you said in terms of where we are in this transition. We're all trying our best to be thoughtful in our approach in actually using analysis, actually using data, actually identifying best practices, and trying as best we can to not create unintended consequences by addressing issues in one area and trying not to create issues in other areas. And yes, this budget absolutely does represent another step in this broader and complex process that we are trying to follow to get to a better place for everyone, including law enforcement, so that we ensure that there's trust, so that we assure that our community feels supported, our officers feel supported, and that we raise all boats here, which in the pursuit of the common good, which is what we're trying to do generally as policymakers. And I really appreciate the thoughtful approach in which Ms. Farag has come at this discussion. There has been clearly a deep level of analysis, and we have Mr. Holland on this call. We have Assistant Chief Didone, who has dedicated most of his professional career to traffic enforcement and issues related to it. And so we are fortunate here in Montgomery County to have some really extraordinary experts. And our pedestrian master plan is another example of where we have tried to, in a holistic and progressive approach, address these issues. And serendipitously, just a couple of days ago, we received an update from the Park and Planning Commission, and they explicitly stated that their pedestrian safety master plan has a very clear racial equity lens. So I also appreciate, Councilmember Joando, that this is not an either or in any way, shape, or form. But I also think we need to be careful through symbolism and trying to send a message, not creating an unintended consequence. And so I come at this conversation in wanting to hear from Mr. Holland, wanting to hear from engineering experts and Vision Zero experts, because all of us over the last 2 years have attended memorial services on various roads across the entire county, which, yes, very much disproportionately, not at the same rates, acknowledge that in terms of traffic stops, but unacceptingly impact our minority communities, our Black and brown communities. And those are just the fatalities. That doesn't include the hundreds of other people that have been maimed, that have been hit, that have had very serious injuries directly as a result of these collisions. So, this, like so many issues, is something that we are and will be thoughtful about in our approach and in our discussion. But I do lean on the folks who are immersed in this field, the traffic engineers, the people who are on the ground. And I'd like to hear from them about what the consequences are of a reduction that, yes, is symbolic, that, yes, is important, that tries to meet this moment that we're in. But if carried out and not done well, leads to more deaths, then we haven't gone very far. In fact, we've taken steps backward. So I would appreciate Ms. Farag's analysis on this. I would, again, like to hear from others as well. And so that, as with all line items that we discuss, and in particular this one, we're thoughtful in our approach. So we're on the same page here. We're all trying to do the same thing. And I think it's important to note that. So with that, I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman. And I would love to hear from Mr. Holland and others who have been invited to participate in this call on this specific issue. And when we happen to have the chair of our Transportation and Environment Committee on this committee, which is another example of I think serendipitously, the T&E committee has been focused on Vision Zero and this issue, not just over the last 2 years, but well before that, and credit to them and their advocacy for the development of the pedestrian safety plan and the bike safety plan, which directly relates to this as well, which I think is also very important. So, and the figure that I was referring to earlier, Mr. Chairman, that I didn't have at the tip of my fingers is the HHS's overall budget was actually increased by 7.5%, more than any other department, as proposed by the county executive. I think directly related to the conversations we're having right now. So with that, I yield back to you.
And I thank you, and I believe the HHS budget needs to be the one area that obviously is enhanced as well. I mean, what we've said, what the various groups have said, is that we need to reimagine, and as we reimagine policing, that somebody else needs to be doing the work, and obviously much of that would be through HHS and transportation and environment as well. But I want to hear from Mr. Holland, and I want to hear from the chief and others. But I'm haunted, I guess is a good word, that I saw a quote by the actor Will Smith, not the Senator Will Smith, but the actor Will Smith. Though in my opinion, the actor Will Smith would be a great senator as well. But he said, he's talking about race relations in America, and he said, it isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. And that truly brought home, and it's something that we've all known. I mean, perhaps not in each person's individual life, but in general, in America, we've had horrible race relations for literally hundreds of years. And we need to get us to that better place. It didn't happen overnight that we have these horrible situations, but it has to be solved as close to overnight as we can possibly solve them, in my opinion. Having said that, in the original statement that I made that I interrupted Ms. Farrago on, I believe we need to figure out what we're doing while we're doing the next step. And this is budgetary. So we have to figure out who is doing the work and how will it be done so that we are safe and that our community. And to Vice President Albernaz's point, and we have all been horrified that we have had so many people literally killed, not near deaths, but killed, that we have gone to the memorials that they have had at the site that they've had it, and it's horrifying in that respect as well. So we need to try to figure out, and we're going to call on Mr. Holland. Wait, I'm going to call on the chief first if he would like to say anything, and then I'll call on Mr. Holland right after that, Wade Holland. But I think that we need to have a path, a blueprint, if you will, on how we can accomplish what is necessary to accomplish. And with that, Chief, if you would like to say anything, if not, and then I'm going to call on Mr. Wade Holland, please.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Council Chair? Good morning to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share some points. First and foremost, I want to thank Ms. Farag for an excellent report in highlighting many of the factors involving the reorganization and where we are with our thoughts about our centralized traffic division. Currently, there are 6 districts, 6 police districts, and we have 6 different traffic units assigned to those districts. Those all have different directions from the district commanders in addressing traffic. And let me be clear so that everyone clearly understands that all police officers, uniformed police officers that are assigned to the Patrol Services Bureau, but also all officers who are in marked police cars or police cars and they are in uniform, have a responsibility for traffic enforcement and noting any issues surrounding any traffic issues while they are patrolling our streets. Someone asked a question about whether or not a police officer who is not assigned to the traffic division, who's sitting at a traffic light in a marked police car and a car runs through the red light, that police officer would not act. And that's not correct. That officer has a duty to act. And the community has complained and noted on many occasions about when an officer when they see a violation and it has not been duly noted or addressed. And that's a major concern that we want to make sure that we are making sure that our officers are addressing any violations of the law that occur before them that might cause safety to our community. So under this new plan, again, I want to stress that we are looking at a more centralized focus on not only just enforcement. Everyone wants to center around that this is the only thing that our traffic officers do, but also on education. As much as a traffic stop is initiated, it still helps us to have the ability in many occasions to educate drivers about the violations in which they commit. There are times I pull people over and had a discussion with them about the violation which they committed, and they didn't know, for example, that they couldn't do X, Y, or Z. And that's an important dynamic here. The traffic division, the focus will also be based on data about high collision rates that occur within the county. And we know that in our more highly populated areas throughout the county, where we have more collisions, whether it be from red light violations, people running red lights, individuals who are not stopping to make a right turn on red, pedestrians are in a crosswalk, and then they make that turn and they strike that pedestrian. And I want to remind the council, the Public Safety Committee, that we have traditionally, throughout the years, have more traffic fatalities than we have homicides here in Montgomery County. And that is a matter of fact. And so it is what I believe to be the police department's responsibility and to work with Mr. Holland and the Vision Zero campaign that we have established to work towards helping to educate our community and to find ways, and we believe this is an effective way in order to focus on these high collision areas in order to reduce traffic fatalities and injuries. Because as noted, we always want to focus on fatalities, but we're also, these collisions cause significant injuries to many of our residents and people who drive through Montgomery County. And it's not just the fact that we're just talking about county residents. We know that Montgomery County is a thoroughfare for people who work here but don't live here, as well as people who drive through this county for a variety of reasons, whether they're delivering, packages or whatever the case may be. But we know that that's a matter of fact. So with that being said, there's also been numerous complaints throughout our community about, when the traffic collisions happen in rush hour traffic, how that can just bottleneck our community for a variety of times during the morning and the evening rush hours. This plan that we have put together is focused on being able to create our roadways to be clear of those collisions as quickly as possible. And we would have these designated officers focusing on those major thoroughfares on our roadways in order to be able to free up our roadways to continue to have our rush hour as fluid as possible. That is one of the goals as well. Again, we know where many of these collisions happen. We know that, you know, sometimes our folks are doing a variety of different violations, such as distracted driving. And one thing I also want us to know is that, and I want to make sure I will remind everyone that drunk driving is still a problem in our community. And I don't know who is else responsible for getting drunk drivers off of our roadways. But drunk driving is still a major issue in this community. That hasn't stopped. People are still dying in car collisions because they've had too much to drink, or killing other innocent drivers, bicyclists, or pedestrians as a result of their reckless behavior. We will not stop focusing on drunk driving. And this is one of the things, again, when we look at how we address traffic issues throughout the county, there has to be a significant focus on these types of things in order to help to reduce the deaths in our communities. You know, over the past 6 months, we have received numerous complaints about vehicles drag racing, speeding complaints throughout our community, and it's been true. It's been verified and true that we have individuals who have decided that they would like to drag race. In fact, just less than 2 weeks ago in Gaithersburg on Air Park Drive, there was a drag race contest that resulted in a death. And that was verified by the actual contesting driver who was basically racing another vehicle. I don't know who from DOT would be able to stop that from happening, but I know our police officers are highly trained in order to try to address that type of behavior. And these are the things that we are focusing on in a way that our community who have complained constantly about this drag racing, loud mufflers driving through their communities late at night. And I know Mr. Hucker is well aware of those because I've received several of those complaints from his office. And the question is, Montgomery County Police, what are you doing about this problem? And in fact, we were alleged to have done nothing about it. And so as we get, you know, there's always this discussion about who are we stopping? Well, are we stopping those who are exhibiting this type of behavior, or are we more concerned about everything else? And so I would say to the council that the discussion really lies about true public safety. Are we going to work towards saving lives, or are we going to have a different approach about how we address traffic safety on our roadways? And I just suggest to you that I think that the where we are coming from our perspective, looking at it from a centralized, looking at data points, looking at things that we know that are happening in our community, is what I suggest is the best practice in which we need to move forward. There are other issues that are concerning our traffic in our district stations, that we get community complaints all the time from our neighborhoods. And this is why I have assigned and I actually propose putting officers at each of our district stations that would take the traffic complaints from their respective communities to address those situations that occur not necessarily on our major roadways. These will be addressed through on our secondary roads, speeding through neighborhoods, not stopping at stop signs, addressing issues that are surrounding our schools. These are significant issues just the same, parking issues. Those have to be addressed. And that is something that we take off that gives them the ability. And we haven't even spoken about the ability to respond to collisions, to handle collision reports, and again, to get cars off of roadways so that we can move traffic safely. These are the responsibilities of our traffic officers, who have a unique responsibility, again, of addressing driver behavior more so than looking at who are we actually stopping. And that's the focus that I think that needs to be addressed. Our officers are significantly trained as we work through a lot of issues around traffic safety. And there is a reason why we go to high degrees in order to make sure that they are trained to provide the best possible outcomes. So I will pause there, but I think that is an important point that needed to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And I do, and I know that all of us have gotten the complaints about noise at 3 o'clock in the morning that people can hear from their homes, and what are we doing, and their quality of life has been hurt. And with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Wade Holland and ask him about his discussions on Vision Zero. Please, Wade, welcome. And I did want to point out that Councilmember Reamer is here. I see his picture. I don't see Councilmember Reamer at this point, but he has joined us. Mr. Holland, please.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Katz, and thank you to the rest of the members on the committee for having me today and talking about Vision Zero and kind of the role of traffic safety enforcement. Obviously, the Vision Zero, the overall goal is really want to build self-enforcing roads. As you'll see, we start bringing versions of the Police Streets Design Guide. That's really kind of the cornerstone of what we want to do for our roadway treatments in the future, so that you wouldn't necessarily need a camera or an in-person officer. The roadway itself gives you the clues about when to drive and what speeds to drive at. So it's kind of long-term, right? So building those types of roads, especially our state highways, that's decades and potentially billions of dollars away. So what do we do in the short term? We still have a need for enforcement. We still have a need for education and outreach as we're rebuilding our roadway network. So some of the things that we talked about in our Equity Task Force, and thank you to Susan for mentioning the work that our Equity Task Force in 2019 put together. First thing they really mentioned was, what kind of traffic laws do we have? How can we change our traffic laws that are enforced to make them more equitable? Because a lot of the things we look at in terms of race are also things of, also trying with poverty as well, looking at expired tags, licensing, registration. These are all economic things that, have different disparate effects on our communities. So how do we look at things that have those kind of impacts in the law and potentially change those at either the county level or at the state level? And as Susan mentioned, with good enforcement, focusing on the most dangerous behaviors, we see less disparities, at least in the Fayetteville example, and we see better safety outcomes. There's been various studies done around the nation and around the world about when you do high visibility enforcement, such as saturation patrols for DUI, focusing on drivers not yielding to pedestrians, it does have a safety impact just as it would for, a traffic engineering project. So that's kind of where we landed based on that kind of evidence, was to really build this kind of focus on the 5 program as part of the centralization program to say, we know the behaviors that are most dangerous. Chief Jones mentioned, obviously, impaired driving, especially in 2020, impaired driving was over half of our fatalities, which is well above the average, around 30% in a given year. Distracted driving, now with April being distracted driving months, focusing on people using their cell phones while driving. Not stopping for stoplights, not stopping for stop signs, and speeding, of course, is always an evergreen issue. So that's, where we are going with this plan. And our next plan is really to focus on the 5, building the roadways so we will need less reliance on police in the future. But as we get to that long-term vision, we need to still have some role for enforcement, whether it's police in person or automated. And that's where we plan to go going forward.
President Hucker, please. You're on mute.
Sorry, got it. I mean, just on the topic of traffic enforcement, I have a lot of concerns about restoring, as strongly as I feel about traffic enforcement, I have concerns about restoring those positions at this point. I don't think when you have a performance problem, you don't solve the performance problem usually by throwing more staff at it. I'm very concerned about the racial disparities in the enforcement that has gone on for quite a while, and Councilmember Chawando described in detail. Yes, it's true we have more traffic fatalities than homicides. That's been the case for many years. That's why we passed Vision Zero 4 years ago. I'm glad the chief is as concerned as he says about reckless driving. I've been asking for more attention to that for years. That's why I thought it was so surprising and disappointing that this division unilaterally virtually suspended traffic enforcement last year without, there's maybe, it may have been an argument for that, but they didn't inform this committee that that was an intentional strategy. We were all caught unaware of that as a strategy. We didn't approve that as a strategy. We had to call a special session on that topic at Councilmember Navarro's request because of the epidemic of reckless driving in Wheaton and Aspen Hill in her district. In my view, that decision was very, very unwise and was really unfair to our other county employees who were out on the front lines during the pandemic. Our firefighters were running COVID patients to the hospital every single day. Our bus drivers went to work every single day and got sick and got hospitalized. We're in the ICU. We lost some of them. Our ABS staff went to work on the front lines. We've had to close, I think, 8 different liquor stores because those workers got sick. But it was really disappointing to me that our traffic officers on their own decided to suspend traffic enforcement just to protect themselves and put the public at risk. The epidemic of reckless driving went on for months. Our residents went ballistic and they were terrified. We all received hundreds of emails about it. There were numerous media stories about the epidemic of reckless driving across Montgomery County. Route 198, University Boulevard, Georgia Avenue in Aspen Hill, ICC, Randolph Road, and even in my district in downtown Silver Spring on Georgia Avenue with ATVs racing on the sidewalk. We had a whole session on that. The AC didn't bring the data to the session. We had to get that later. And then, to make matters worse, numerous state lawmakers contacted me about the inappropriateness and how disappointed they were to see our traffic enforcement AC testifying in Annapolis against the formal position of the county executive and the council on automated enforcement. That clearly had an impact and helped lead to the defeat of that legislation that would have saved lives of pedestrians and drivers. I'm very committed to Vision Zero. There are lots of ways to invest in reaching the goals of Vision Zero. We'll make many of those investments in the T&E committee in particular. To me, it doesn't make sense to add to this division at this time to do that.
Thank you. First off, are we do we know the vacancies? Are there vacancies in the traffic division right now?
So, Mr. Katz, the way that this is designed, and I appreciate Mr. Hooker's response to and what he said. All of that is technically not correct because, again, as I noted before, he noted some of what Assistant Chief Dadone noted about traffic enforcement, and I get it that there were some information about some of the traffic units. First of all, we sent our traffic enforcement division home during COVID. So I want to make sure that that's clear. We sent them home. And why did we send them home is because I was requested to downsize and we needed to have a plan to have the ability in case officers were who possibly would have gotten sick during our patrol division, with our patrol division, so that we would have officers to be able to backfill to respond to calls for service. So that was a large part of our COVID response. Those officers weren't brought back until September. Now, I don't disagree that there was some lack of engagement, but it wasn't solely on every traffic enforcement officer. That was not relayed correctly. So I just want to kind of make a point there. And again, all of patrol was responsible for traffic enforcement regardless. Now, to your point, Mr. Katz, in response to the numbers. Again, currently we have 46 full-time traffic officers. In my reorganizational plan, and again, those 46 officers through the entire county are dedicated to traffic safety. Under the current plan that I have for reorganization, I am downsizing that to have 22 officers who will be dedicated to traffic enforcement under the centralized traffic plan. So that's a reduction right off the start from where we are currently to what we're going to go to from a centralized plan. And I'll remind this committee, when I presented you all the reorganizational plan, that I reallocated positions for a variety of different purposes. I didn't ask for new positions. I didn't get any new positions. I took our existing complement of officers and reallocated them to more specified responsibilities that we think to look at a public safety focus. And this was one of them. And so the 22 positions are the centralized traffic. And then we originally in the plan we had, I believe it was going to be approximately 15 additional officers that would go to our district stations, again, to handle traffic complaints, and to deal with traffic issues, parking in the districts. So if you take one district, for example, the Silver Spring district, from downtown Silver Spring all the way up through Burtonsville, those two officers, if would have gotten those two officers for those positions, would have been responsible for all of the external complaints from our community. In Bethesda, we had designated 3. Bethesda, we have the highest number of community complaints in our entire county. But now, because I was restricted to the number of officers that positions, I downsized that to now we only have 7 community traffic officers in the entire county. And 2 of them will be in Bethesda. All of the other districts will receive 1. And so, yes, we will have a decrease in our central traffic focus. But again, and this will be all in line with the Vision Zero process. And again, as I remind you all, these were reallocated positions, how we are now handling this.
Okay, so if I can understand the numbers, because I've gotten a little bit confusing to me at this point. So right now, you were saying there's 46 people in the traffic?
Yes, sir. Currently, we have 46 that are divided through our 6 district stations.
And you're reimagining, there would be 23, is that right?
Well, there'll be 22.
22.
22 in the centralized traffic division.
And then there was a 15 throughout the 6 districts?
That was my original plan, but
Yeah.
through our budget cuts, we decided to, we basically put up 8 positions out of our traffic that would have been assigned to our district stations. So when we put up our budget cuts that was requested by the county executive and accepted by this council, we put up those 8 positions to actually be cut, and to include 1 collision reconstruction to be added, 1 collision reconstruction unit which handles all of our fatalities. We put up 1 position which is an investigative position for that unit.
Okay, so if, and Vice President Albanaz wants to speak, and then Councilmember Giwando, but if we did away with these 9, what we're calling traffic positions, would that affect the traffic division as the numbers that you're suggesting? You know, see my confusion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Katz. Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
We did away with these 9 traffic, what we're calling traffic positions. Would that not, would that allow for, if we did away with it, would that allow for you to reconstruct the traffic divisions the way that you're suggesting? Do you need these 9 positions to do what that you want to do?
So the way I have it already planned, we are prepared to move forward with our centralized traffic unit. Yep. The way we have it with the numbers of bodies that we have with the 22 positions. We also we still will have 1 officer at each district station except Bethesda, where we will have 2 officers to handle traffic complaints. That's what we are currently dealing with. We will have them to handle those particular complaints.
Okay. Council Vice President.
Thanks. So a couple of thoughts and then questions. I guess the first is, well, just to summarize, to make sure I got it. So, and understand where you're going with this, Chief, and having this context in this discussion, I think is helpful on a lot of levels. So to comply with the reduction in savings plan, you consolidated these positions and centralized them. I have a lot of experience with that. I used to do that all the time when I was at the rec department when we had to reduce our positions. In this case, because officers, and just to be clear, all officers have the ability and the obligation to enforce traffic if they see something. And so it's not like these these positions were exclusively working on enforcement. There was obviously a lot of complexities to the reenactment and the analysis and the study. And I should also note that there was a lot of input by MCPD on the pedestrian safety master plan. And there's been a lot of input from police in working in consultation with Mr. Holland and in the Vision Zero work. So there was a collaboration proactively on the front end as we developed those plans. But I feel a little better about the reduction of these positions with what you've said, and similar to the consolidated effort around the stealing of cars. That's another example of a transition that happened as part of a reorganization. It was reported that we were reducing the overall oversight of car thefts, by some. That wasn't accurate. We were just trying to centralize those efforts to be more nimble in our approach, acknowledging that it was a different issue in different parts of our community, and that actually gave you a little bit more flexibility. We'd all love more people, but I think that consolidating in a way that maximizes the folks we have in some instances can actually be more effective if it's done well. And it sounds like that's the approach that you're trying to take here. Just want to confirm that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate, Mr. Albanaz. It is, we are looking at efficiencies to make sure that we have a clear focus, and we're focused on that with the mission of the traffic unit to go hand in hand with Vision Zero. By working with Vision Zero and looking at the data collection and how we address issues within the areas of concern all throughout the county, that's where we will be putting focus on to address collision reduction, as well as issues around traffic enforcement that needs our education that we need to address in those particular areas. And this is going to give us, again, a much more focus-driven response to addressing these issues throughout the county.
And Mr. Holland, this next question is for you. So, the enforcement aspect of this and the analysis and the education is only one part of the story. The other part of the story is looking at speed limits, looking at cross sections in general, which cuts over into T&E, but is relevant to this discussion. So, again, I just want the public to be assured that we are very much concerned about pedestrian safety and the loss of these positions is not going to contribute to more potential fatalities. That in this transition, as we look at enforcement and what belongs in DOT and what belongs in police, and that's an ongoing conversation. I have a lot of questions and concerns about that, but that's a separate conversation. What's before us right now is the reduction of these positions. But could you just speak a little bit about, in light of this reduction and in light of this centralization of these efforts, maybe if you could shed some light on your efforts as we look at some of those infrastructure issues that address pedestrian safety issues, which are ancillary but relevant to this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Albernas, for that. Yeah, I mean, you look at our budget, right, for Vision Zero on an annual basis, the largest part of it is the CIP. So I think, we do a pretty good job of putting our money where our mouth is, that we say engineering and design and the master planning and land use, those are the things that get us to Vision Zero, and that's where we spend our money. That's important. So it's upgrading crosswalks, it's lighting, it's all the, road diets, it's new bicycle facilities, all those things that can help us, one, control speed and to reduce injuries. And in terms of the, traffic enforcement, as Chief Jones mentioned, really making sure that more and more efforts are really focused on those most dangerous efforts, rather than, more minor violations.
Okay, and I appreciated, Ms. Farag, in your packet the map of where the highest concentrations of these collisions are occurring, and yes, they do cross over into our Black and brown communities, which, as chair of HHS, I couldn't help but notice it's also the areas that have the highest positive COVID test cases in the county, almost exactly. And so, there's just a lot of layers and challenges that we have to address from multiple fronts. But I would just encourage us in this transition that we focus much more of our time and attention in those areas where we know there's the highest concentration of problems. I know we're doing that, but I think we need to double and triple down, particularly as people start coming back into their vehicles and transition back to a more traditional work environment over the next year. It was already bad this last year. I'm very concerned about how worse it will be a year from now as more people get back in their cars. So just something to concentrate on. And I think that's it for now. But based on this conversation, Mr. Chair, I do feel comfortable, as Councilmember Hucker noted, in this particular line item reduction of accepting the reductions as has been proposed. Here was the last thing. Ms. Farag, you also mentioned the best practice that's occurring in North Carolina and in other jurisdictions of prioritizing those more severe, those more serious related matters. Chief, just wondering your reaction and comment to that. I do think that not being an expert, but from the outside looking in, makes some sense in concentrating those efforts of the officers on those more severe cases. Are we doing that in practice now? Is that something that we're going to be doing more of in the future? Because we're all concerned about the stark disproportionate level of traffic stops, which, in raw data, and I know that doesn't tell the whole story, but it tells a very important part of it. Just your reaction to that, your thoughts on that from a policy perspective.
Yeah, so we put a focus on that in 2020 to actually, and part of this was a pilot program that allowed us to focus on that very similar Fayetteville model. And we believed it was very effective, which is what led to my decision to want to focus on a more centralized approach. Because again, then we know that we have the ability to work. Now, granted, it was a COVID year, but we also had kind of tested this in 2019 to begin the process to really kind of see what the results were. And when 2019, which was more normal, it gave us the ability to say, yes, we believe this is a winning strategy that will give us the ability to reduce those encounters.
Thank you. And just the final thought for now on this issue, and I may come back to it as other questions arise, but you know, the education component is really important, you know, clearly, and having the experts in the field who can explain this in a way that people can process and understand is important. That doesn't have to be done by a sworn officer. It can be done by civilian positions as well, in tandem, in partnership with, to be able to expand our reach. I know when I was still at the Recreation Department, our office was on the corner of Veers Mill and Randolph, which happened to be one of the tragic hotspot areas. And there were 4 traffic-related fatalities within a 3-month span at one point while we were still in that office. And we actually hosted a community session and dialogue from our Recreation Department headquarters that night. And some of the most compelling messages were by civilians, by folks that were carrying out the message in partnership. And actually, Assistant Chief Titone was there that night. And it was, I thought, a very effective way for us in tandem to reach out to the community proactively. And clearly, we're going to need to do more of that moving forward. And we can do that, I think, within the existing framework of this budget and that of other ancillary departments and DOT as well. And we're going to need to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate Vice President Albernaz's questions. It kind of tees me up pretty well and allows me to not ask one of them. Mr. Holland, I'm glad you're here, and I know I feel like you came on right in the middle of the storm here, literally, and got going, but so I haven't had a chance to actually, I don't think, meet with you in person, but I know we've been had some crossover. I really appreciate you talking about the design and the roadways, sidewalks, and all the kind of things that we need to do on the planning DOT side, speeds, you know, and then obviously enforcement, whether automated or human driven, and which agency. We need education. We need the whole thing, right? And I think that's kind of what was underlying what you were saying. And, you know, I guess it was 2019. I launched an initiative with our colleague from Prince George's County, Monique Anderson Walker, called Driving at Home. And we were going around to high schools. We did one at Blair, and we were moving our way. You know, tens of thousands of students learning how to drive. All of them are already pedestrians, taking the bus and doing things. How do we get them the information, the training, the education component? We were working with DOT and we're working with the department. I'd like to just put a plug in as we roll out going back to school next year. I think we should ramp that back up. And I think it's a critical component as people just are going to orient themselves back to being in person, in public. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And I think it's an example of how we have to come at this safety issue from multiple sides. So just appreciate the work you're doing. I did want to ask about the data that, and I'm glad Councilmember Albernaz brought this up. I'm familiar with the Fayetteville model. As I said in my opening remarks, focusing, prioritizing the most serious incidences, I think, and across the board in law enforcement is what we need to be doing, focusing on violent crime. And in this context, in the traffic side and pedestrian safety and vehicle safety and roadway safety, it's focusing on those most dangerous offenses. And so, Chief, you mentioned that you all had started this work in 2019. Obviously, 2020, the data you're going to get from that is not, you know, I don't think would be super helpful because there weren't many people on the roads and the traffic division wasn't out there. But in 2019, much of the data from the OLO report that I cited at the beginning was using 2017 and 2018 data. So that deep disproportionality I talked about was present in 2018. I would be very interested if you implemented this prioritization approach in 2019 or started to look at, and this is, I guess, to our staff and to you may be able to respond somewhat now. Have you looked at any improvement in that disproportionality in the 2019 numbers? Have you looked into that at this point? You're still on mute there, Chief. There you go.
I'll say my clicker wasn't working. So, no, we haven't looked at the disproportionality up to this point, Mr. Jawando, but what I will tell you is that, we will now be able to really, once we are able to centralize this unit, we'll be able to look at the data much more closely in those specific areas that we are concentrated on. Again, we did it more of a pilot approach, just looking at the effectiveness of the unit where we're going to focus on. But moving forward, we are going to again be able to take this data outside of the data of all traffic enforcement. The OLO report focuses on the entire police department that deals with a variety of traffic enforcement. We are going to basically be more cognizant of the centralized traffic division to look at its effectiveness in working within the Vision Zero concept. And then we can really look at who are we stopping and where is the focus and why are we stopping them and what are those violations, okay?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. And I think that will be helpful to compare to what's going on with the non-centralized unit folks. And I just think, and how that might inform that work. So I just would hope that as you're rolling that out even more, that we would be able to capture that. And it sounds like you're thinking about it. The last thing I just want to say, Mr. Morris, are you from the county executive's office? Who is that you?
Yes, I'm from OMB.
Okay, OMB. I just want to make sure I'm hearing a little bit of conflicting here. I just want to make sure is the OMB position the chief's position? Is there some sort of is there a difference in position here on what we're saying, that accepting these cuts or not? Or can you just state the position of OMB and the county executive, and then I guess I'll ask as a follow-up: is the chief advocating a different position
In regards to the position cuts for traffic?
Correct.
So the department had offered those up. It's a continuation of the FY21 savings plan that we implemented for FY22. It's supported by the county executive in order for NCPD to meet their budget.
Okay. And Chief, are you advocating a different position, or are you saying you're going along with that?
No, I am not advocating a different position. I am with the county executive in the proposal.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Frog, please.
Yes, guess I should ask what the committee wants to vote on that particular issue. I did also want to just point out, to put it out there, that these are the positions that focus specifically on traffic safety. They're not necessarily like patrol officers or DCAT officers or the SAT teams that look more toward the investigatory stops that may be contributing more to disparities. We don't know that because we don't have the data to look at that, but I did want to say that the focus of these positions is traffic safety. The reductions, it's my understanding, were solely for savings and not operational, not related to police reform, not related to racial equity. My recommendation to restore them was to address Vision Zero safety needs, with the understanding that as they reprioritize the enforcement, it will help reduce racial disparities in traffic stops.
Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we accept the reductions as proposed by the county executive, but we'll note Ms. Farag's recommendation to revisit and analyze this to ensure that there weren't any unintended consequences.
President Hucker, are you going to second it? You might. Let me ask you, Chief, and I'm fine with that. How much time would we need, or once you do the reconfiguring, to come back so that we can figure out whether the reconfiguring is really doing what we want it to do?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Katz, that we I think we would need at least a year worth of data to see what is the effectiveness of this unit and what are the additional needs and demands that we might receive from or see from the district stations as it relates to complaints and issues within those particular districts, and how those responsibilities are allocated, and what is so-called the workload from those particular units, because that's going to be a significant change within our district stations. If we can, for example, and I'll give a quick example, if we really kind of focus on sort of the area such as the map as Ms. Farag has noted, but if we look at our some of the districts that are in our more rural parts of our community, such as looking at Germantown, Damascus, Poolsville, or other areas, then what is going to be our responses, and how can we handle that workload in those particular areas to address traffic safety there. So I think it's going to take us a year to really be able to collect that data and to be able to report back out in order to have a better understanding of what this is going to look like.
And Mr. Holland, if hopefully it doesn't, but if because of Vision Zero we see increased fatalities, we'll certainly know that. But if what is being proposed to help for Vision Zero is not working, how much time would you need to come back with other suggestions on what we need to be doing to correct that? My concern is, and if we reduce these 9, okay, but my concern is that if we make an error by reducing these 9, we're putting people in jeopardy for their safety, and so that's my concern.
Yeah, Councilmember Katz, thanks for the question. I think it would be very difficult probably to see if we say 9 officers, were pulled out of the budget, what that would be on the overall safety impact, right? We have all the rest of our, complement of officers still doing enforcement. There's also, what we saw in Montgomery County, we saw nationwide in terms of the increase in fatalities and kind of the fewer officers on the road during the pandemic. So they also saw that increase. The question is, once we go back, do those things start to reverse that pattern as kind of people get back on the road and officers get back on the road? So there's a lot of things moving right now because of the response to the pandemic. So it'd be really hard to pull out. But what we've proposed in the upcoming Vision Zero 2030 plan and the fiscal year 22-23 work plan, which we'll be releasing soon, is saying, fiscal year 22, let's do this central traffic, expand the pilot, make it semi-permanent. FY23, let's go and look at it, do all the analysis of who's getting stopped, what are they getting stopped for, and using all the correct tests, not they can test for bias.
Okay, very good. We have a motion. We can do it unanimously if you would like. I'm with it as well. So, but I guess we should vote on it at this point. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And that's 3-0. Please continue with the packet. And there you go.
Okay, the next one is IT positions, which I had mentioned earlier. That starts on page 12. There is a lapse of 1 IT supervisor position for 6 months and 1 IT technician for 6 months. I've got a typo in there on the cost of the supervisor. It should be $70,000, which I wanted to note. And as mentioned earlier, data analysis and collection and reporting are critical for understanding police encounters. And I've included the fiscal impact statement language from Bill 4520, which indicates how many staff hours they need to build the required data sets that the bill's changes would require. They would need to hire an additional program specialist too, a senior IT specialist as well. And they also would have to they'd have to fill one of the IT supervisor positions that is currently lapsed in order to support those efforts. There's no recommendation here other than to put it on your radar and understand that these staffing and resources are necessary to move forward on the data collection that the council is currently considering.
Right, thank you. And I appreciate the being on the radar, as I have said, as all of us I think have said, if we want to have these types of this type of information, we have to provide the resources necessary to provide this type of information. Thank you very much. And if there's no other comment on that, we're going to continue to move through the packet, please.
The next item is recruit classes. The proposed budget is adding 12 additional recruits to the winter class, and that's a cost of about $650,000. That addition is addressing the attrition challenges that the department is currently facing, and it also reflects the addition of the 2 sergeant positions in the Internal Affairs Division. They'll have 24 recruits budgeted for the summer class and 34 recruits in the winter class. I did include a chart on annual sworn attrition. Just for your reference, on page 13, it shows the number of police officers lost each year to resignation and retirement. The department had long been experiencing an upward trend in the attrition. It's increasingly difficult to keep up through recruitment. They had originally budgeted 1 officer per month for many years. That increased a couple years ago to 1.5 officers per month resigning, and now they've got an expectation of 2 officers per month leaving, and that's just resigning, separating from service. There's also a significant increase in the number of officers who are retiring, who are entering the discontinued retirement service plan. And that chart's shown on page 13 for you. You know, that they've been in the 20s and the 30s, and they're expecting up to 49 or 50 to start retiring in FY23 and beyond. So I just wanted to put that in context. They have increased the number of recruit positions that are budgeted. It still remains to be seen if they can actually fill that with qualified applicants moving forward. And that's something that the committee should stay on top of as well as we move into the fall. The IAD, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I believe that we need to have a true discussion about starting salaries for our police officers. If we're losing more and more police officers, and we need to replace the police officers, the numbers that we need, then for us to have one of, if not the lowest starting salary for police officers in the DMV makes no sense to me. And if we want to attract the very best, then we have to pay to be able to attract the very best. So I think we need to have that discussion. And of course, if you do that, then that means that all salaries need to be a part of that discussion. You can't have someone new come in and someone that's been here for a couple of years be making less. So we need to have a good, open, transparent discussion on what we're doing for salaries. Council Vice President.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I am very concerned about the trend of recruitment and retention that we're seeing, not just in our department, but across the country. And for, understandable reasons. This is an extraordinarily challenging time as we work through this very deep-rooted and long overdue systemic change. There is a transition period that is challenging, to say the least. And I personally know some really amazing, dedicated officers in MCPD. I've had the opportunity to work with them and meet them over the years. These are people that are just really good people and have been dedicating their entire professional careers to public service. And we're losing a lot of good people. And we have to be very cautious while we move forward in this transition and enact important policy measures to ensure racial equity, to ensure that our entire community feels comfortable and confident in our law enforcement, which is obviously critically important to law enforcement and everyone. We can't lose sight of the stark reality that is right before us. And in addition to the steps that you've just outlined, Chairman Katz, we also need to look at the cost of living, how challenging it is. There is undeniably a best practice, and all advocates can agree in having our first responders live in the communities that they're responsible for patrolling and serving. It just makes a lot of literally walking around sense for that to happen. But it is very expensive to live here. And our first responders, and this is true of fire and rescue as well, and true of our medical personnel and nurses and social workers, it's true across the board. And I do think we need to start getting very serious about tax credits and about incentives for first-time homeowners and ways that we can incentivize ensuring that we have the best of the best, the folks that are here for the right reasons in these jobs for the right reasons, but frankly need support in order to be able to do their jobs and do them well, so that we can continue to recruit the best of the best here in our community, understand our values, understand our culture, embrace our diversity. That doesn't just happen. You have to have the factors in place for it to happen. And so I very much associate myself with your comments, but wanted to expand on looking at other measures that will help as well.
I agree with everything that you just said. Ms. Frog, after budget, I mean, obviously, you need to get through budget, but after budget, if this could be one of the, and not the first topic, possibly this very important discussion.
Okay, of course.
Okay.
The next item is Internal Investigation Division positions on page 13. The recommended budget is adding 2 new sergeant positions to Internal Affairs to help reduce the caseload per investigator, and that will allow for more timely completion of the administrative investigations. They currently have 6 sergeants that are allocated to IAD, and that allocation hasn't changed in more than 16 years. It shouldn't be a savings, that's an add. At a cost of $190,000. This, IAD, internal investigations, is critical as far as police transparency and accountability is to the community. I just note a little bit about where you can find information on their IAD reports. They do issue reports every year. Adequate staffing there is necessary to ensure both timely and comprehensive investigations. It's my understanding they like to wrap up investigations in about 90 days, but some of them are actually taking 6 to 9 months at this point. And I also wanted to point out, as you're well aware, that the state's police reform package repeals LEOBR and replaces it with a different disciplinary framework. And it should be looked at more closely to see how that actually impacts IAD operations. And that's something that I'm recommending the committee return back to in the fall too, just to see how that might be impacting police disciplinary reviews and their staffing and resources necessary to take out to cover anything that the state reform package changes for them.
Okay. Any other comment? And I understand that my audio was garbled a little bit. Is this better at this point? Do I have, yes, I have head shaking yes. So it's rare that I ever see a head shaking yes when I just talk about anything. Anyhow, thank you. Okay, go ahead, please.
The next item is the centralized auto theft section.
I'm sorry. Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, as the chair and I discussed, the council has legislation before the council on discipline. And I think we would benefit from trying to sort through how the proposal that we have interacts with the state sooner than the fall, and then make a determination, what part of the legislation is no longer preempted and still, should be considered by the council. So we can make that assessment, I think, with staff. But I just wanted to ask that we not have a kind of a broader expectation that we won't take up the disciplinary issues until the fall. I think we should potentially be a little more flexible as to when we would bring that before the committee and the council.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Frog, if you could make a note, I know that you have plenty of notes we always find something for you to do. But if you could make a note, please, to get together with the attorneys to determine what we can and what we cannot do based on the I guess as of Monday night's legislation for from the state. And if you could please let us know that, yes, Vice President, 1 second. If you could please let us know what is possible, and then we can begin those conversations. But we have to know what we can and can't do before we can have the discussion. Council Vice President.
I agree. I actually didn't mean to raise my hand.
All right.
So I apologize.
Well, it's good to wave to you. Good.
Yeah.
And it's good to wave to you, Mr. President. Yes. Go ahead, please. Susan. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it looked like the chief has his hand up on the
Oh,
screen. I didn't know if he wanted to speak.
There you. Chief, you're sitting way back there. I didn't see your hand. Please, Chief.
I tried to utilize the Zoom hand raise and
Now I see it.
right, no problem. Okay. Well, I wanted to go back I just want to raise a couple points about where we are with our recruitment, with salaries, and as well as our retention in retirement. And make a couple points there, and then a couple points on the internal affairs. So we are ranked 11th in this region for starting salary. So I just want to make that to the point for this committee, that we are ranked number 11 in the region for starting salaries. As it relates to retention and what is coming before this county, currently we have 211 sworn officers who are eligible for retirement today. 211 officers who could retire today. Of that number, we have 119 officers who are in the drop, who are in the program. That means within the next 3 years, it is guaranteed that we will be 119 less senior officers on this department as we work towards our recruitment goals of trying to maintain the numbers of officers coming on the department from a recruitment standpoint in the coming years. That is basically 9% of the department within the next 3 years. And we also have additional folks who are nearing that number, but that again is a number of concern for me. As it relates to internal affairs, again, when we look at where we are in today's environment, clearly, as Ms. Farag has noted, is that we've had 6 investigators in that division for the past 16 years. But as we know, for the past 6 years, with body-worn camera footage, the increase of the workload has truly grown expeditiously from that perspective. And so we really do need that additional assistance. I will also say that our current audit that's being conducted is going to also provide some recommendations, I believe, as they review our internal affairs process. And some of the recommendations that will also come before that I think will need to be reviewed as it relates to personnel and how that is addressed for a department of our size. And again, as we always talk about doing things on a shoestring budget, we have traditionally had to do that based upon the resources that we've had, but that's something that I think is duly noted. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Reno.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a observation that when we talk about starting salaries, I think it's important to also talk about salaries after 5 years and after 10 years and after 20 years. Because often a bargaining unit will make the choice to prioritize their older or more longer tenured employees in their bargaining strategy, because frankly, that's where most of their members are. And so the starting salary is quickly left behind, as the schedule increases. So I would just, recommend or ask that as we consider that issue, we look at all the different points in the schedule and make an assessment. I mean, if we are 11th in the region, not only at start, but at 5 and 10 and 20 years, I think that's more broadly indicative of a problem as opposed to we are comparative, we might be ahead at 10 years. I don't know. We could be 3rd in the region at 10 years. I don't know. So generally, when you go into the profession, you're going in for many years. And you know that. So that's just it's a consideration. When it comes to the conversation about recruitment, I would really appreciate focus not only on economic issues related to recruitment, but our goals with who we want to recruit into police work and how we can, shift a bit and attract people into police work who perhaps have a more social, health background or other kinds of backgrounds. I can't really opine very knowledgeably here, but just that, I think it's a challenging profession. I know, and I do have some concerns about some of the culture, in the industry, and I think trying to shift that with a different type of recruiting strategy, more local recruitment. I know we do that, but I think there's a lot of ways that we could look very broadly at how we recruit and who we recruit and what the role is, not only of compensation, but intentional workforce strategies and other elements of that conversation. It should be no surprise that there are a lot of retirements. This is a baby boom retirement, we're hitting that crest. Resignations, I think, more indicative of perhaps some issues. But I also think we have to do a better job with redeploying or deploying our officers as efficiently as possible. I think that's going to come up a little bit in a moment as we talk about this proposed community services office, CRO, successor to SRO. But, I think that I really think we have to do a broader job of understanding how efficient police work is and how well targeted it is. I think it's important to have police officers working on serious crime. And I've always wondered how efficient are we in doing that? And how, I don't know if OLO could maybe help us understand that better, but it's just a question, I guess, that I have is when we're on patrol, when we're driving around, are there ways that we could deploy our existing force to have a greater impact without necessarily needing to solve everything with more officers? Because those are hard to come by, and in any event. So I just wanted to share that to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. And I do believe that in this conversation, we need for recruitment, for starting salaries, for salaries beyond the starting salaries, for the cost of living, everything that's associated with being a police officer. We need to look at our competition. If we're looking at trying to attract a person, that person is going to be looking to other places as well. They don't just apply to become a police officer in Montgomery County. They apply in many other places, and we need to be doing that as quickly as we can so that we can have the very best people who are looking to do this kind of work. And it becomes more and more difficult to get someone that wants to do it, that we can get the very best people to be in Montgomery County. And with that, I think nobody else wanted to speak on this topic, right? I think I'm good. Okay. Ms. Farag, please.
Sure. The next item is the centralized auto theft section. I called it division, but apparently it's just a section. That change has already been implemented in the department. It eliminated 3 police officer positions, not supervisors. I made a typo. I believe it was 1 sergeant, 1 corporal, and 1 police officer, in addition to 1 civilian position. And then it shifted 5 auto theft detectives back out to the district stations. All district stations but 1D, which is Rockville, received an additional detective. The elimination of that centralized auto theft division also caused the loss of $165,000 grant funding from the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council. And I just wanted to note that because it requires a technical adjustment in this recommended budget to both reduce the grant funding by $165,000 and the expenditures. Other than that, I'm not recommending any changes.
Okay.
School resource officers. This eliminates 5 SRO positions. They were added by council in FY19 and FY20 to be deployed to middle schools. They were never deployed to their school assignments. I believe they had been tentatively scheduled for this school year, and then COVID closed schools. That's a savings of about $570,000.
Okay.
Patrol officers, I'm sorry.
Guys, is the proposal for community resource officers, the successor to SROs, is that in the budget, or is that something that would be implemented in the future? You haven't really touched on it, Susan, so I'm just
there is no budget impact of changing the SRO program. It shifts officers to a different location, and Chief Jones can speak to this better than me, that they're apparently supposed to be responsive to the schools, but not in the schools. So there is no savings. The only cost of the SROs are the staff positions. There are no operating expenses. There's nothing but the staff members themselves.
The idea of changing their name is not, that's not in the budget itself. They're continuing to be called SROs in the budget. Is that right?
The budget's only addressing fiscal changes. It's not addressing program changes that have no budget impact.
So, Chief, can you share, if just assuming all else being equal or something like that, at what point do these officers, according to the executive's proposal, take on this new function or this different function?
Mr. Reamer, we have not finalized the new program as it exists today.
Okay.
Therefore, we have not officially worked through all of the logistics with Montgomery County Public Schools to create a memorandum of understanding of exactly what will the new program look like. So therefore, it's not part of this budget. The existing positions still remain, that the SROs still function as school resource officers currently today, and that will remain the same until we reallocate those positions to a different role based upon the county executive's request.
And the council's ultimate approval. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's good to know. I wasn't sure about the logistics or the timeline. My views on SROs haven't changed, and I don't believe we should ratify the continuation of the program in this budget or the deployment of the CROs. I think we should put in motion something better and more, more helpful to the community. So we don't have to go into it at this time, but I would ask that we not make it a consent item for the council, but we try to work through it at the full council. Thank you.
And I think it should be noted, and Vice President Albanese, you're going to be next, but I think it should be noted as of Monday, obviously Council members Jawando and Councilmember Rice came in with a additional suggestion about a task force, and so we need to hear from those suggestions as well as we go through this important topic. Right, Mr. Vice President, please.
Thanks. I'll just note a few things. The first is there is a lot of thoughtful discussion and deliberation going on in a number of different key areas among the stakeholders who are ultimately going to be responsible for carrying out this transition and being responsible for its aftermath. And obviously the council plays an important role from a budgetary standpoint, but the folks who are actually on the ground operationalizing this are the ones that should be dictating and making decisions, because they're the ones that are going to have to take into account, for example, the agreements that are in place on how to address school incidents like fights, school incidents like active shooters, school incidents that rise to a certain level that will unfortunately require police intervention, and there will be a new system in place in how to do that appropriately and safely to ensure the safety of all of our students and faculty and staff and everyone impacted. And that just doesn't happen with a snap of the fingers. And that should be dictated by the folks that are doing this work. And so I recently had a meeting with the county executive. I, like all of you, saw in real time the proposal put forward by some of our colleagues. And I know that there are, as I said, thoughtful deliberations on recommendations on this transition that will be implemented in time for the new school year, and acknowledging a number of the mitigating factors about the behavioral and emotional challenges that students have faced this last year, the trauma that they've experienced, what that means and how that translates into the upcoming school year. So there are a lot of factors here. And I look forward to these really trusted individuals who are on the ground doing their work, making recommendations to us that may or may not be illustrated in this budget, but we certainly all universally will support to be thoughtful in how we do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Reamer. You're on mute.
In that same spirit, although I don't agree that, I think the council has to make the decision here, and the Board of Education. But I know that the Councilmember Rice and Jawando have proposed a task force. I'm a little unclear on the extent of that task force's mission around that part of the question. You know, what will be the future of school safety, and what will be the future of the role of police? I think we should make sure it's an important part of the task force, and that we bring this to a conclusion based on a clear directive of policy from the council. And they can come back to us, you know, after their time with a very detailed and thorough framework. It's not, you know, it's not something that you can just, as you said, snap your finger and make happen. It has to be worked through in a painstaking way. But I think it's important for us to say what we want from the council, and then have the task force figure out the way to make that happen. So I think the conversation about what we want should, you know, needs to conclude, and not just allow others to make a decision for us, so to speak. Again, I am working on a proposal for how to add that scope into the task force that I hope you all will support, and you know, we'll have that soon. But I do think that would be a helpful way forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Frog, if you could please continue.
Sure. The next item is patrol officers. This proposed recommendation abolishes 5 patrol officer positions, and they are located in district patrol investigations. It will eliminate 1 police officer from each of 5 districts. These positions are primarily responsible for investigations into minor crimes, such as theft from autos. And that raised a concern for me. I have a couple of concerns about this elimination. Theft from autos happens to be the most common crime in the county, and residents complain about it often. And those types of complaints reduce the council level, you know, quite regularly. We hear from residents about theft from autos and that type of thing. Reducing the number of officers who can devote time to solving these crimes both impairs the ability to prevent future thefts, but it can also potentially make the department less responsive to community requests and needs. And that does become part of the community and police relations aspect. They want to know that their police department is responsive to them. So that could potentially, considering that they look at some of the most common crimes in the county, it could further erode police and community relations on that point. I also want to put this in the overall context, which you've touched on earlier, about the understanding the ongoing impact that retirements, resignations, and promotions are having. We haven't spoken that much about promotions and how that really puts pressure on recruiting difficulties. The department's already seen a really rapid turnover the past couple of years. They've lost a police chief, 4 assistant chiefs, and 9 captains have separated from service in the past 2 years. And of the 20 captains in the department who remain, 12 of them have fewer than 3 years of experience in that rank. 2 assistant chiefs are about to retire, and this just continues to create further pressure on vacancies and increase the need to recruit replacements. So with these patrol officer reductions, patrol officer level reductions, I have those concerns, further eroding police department's ability to be responsive to the community. And again, just putting more pressures on that recruitment need down at the beginning levels of police officer work. I'm not recommending changes at this point, but I did want to bring these potential issues to your attention.
And I appreciate you bringing them. I mean, I think that those are all viable concerns, obviously. So, so you'll bring it back up. What are we going to do with this one?
We can bring it back up in the fall. We can just make it a component of the recruitment and retention and okay. Issues in salary, compensation, that type of thing.
Does that meet with my colleagues' approval? Yes.
It does. I'll just note, I mean, car thefts are up significantly. So, and I know some of that is, because of what's transpired this last year. but it's just something to keep a real close eye on. And in many instances, there was a A1 story in the Washington Post that many of these car thefts are being carried out by juveniles. And so I think that there's a lot of layers to this that we have to focus on. And I agree with Ms. Farag's concern about the reduction of this specific position, especially now. But I do agree with her recommendation. But as has been the case with some other instances, I think we need to come back to this as well. And let's hope that as things get back to normal, those numbers decline, because those additional supports that we can provide our youth will be able to be enacted, because they've all been on hold this last year for obvious reasons.
The next item is the TASER program. The budget includes $570,000 for replacement tasers. I just wanted to note that this is a critical portion of the toolkit that police officers have. It provides a less lethal option in certain circumstances that can help prevent officers the need to use lethal force in some circumstances. So it is a tool that is helpful in maximizing safer policing. I'm recommending approval of that item. The next issue, again, is a police accountability issue, mobile video camera systems, which are in the patrol vehicles. This expenditure increases by about $470,000. The department is currently transitioning over to Axon cameras under the same contract they have with body-worn cameras and cameras in interview rooms. The initial cost here for transitioning over to Axon is a little bit more expensive, but over the course of 10 years, they expect to realize about $5 million in savings. Again, the program is an important tool for police accountability. On the fiscal side of things, with 911 revenues, there's a significant expenditure reduction in same services for Next Gen 911, a $2.9 million reduction in general funds. The overall total budget would be $19.5 million, and that's in anticipation of state aid. And as you know, a couple of years ago, the General Assembly passed Carl Henn's law, and that increases 911 fees that are imposed on all phone services. Those revenues go to help fund different counties' PSAPs, which includes the 911 call centers, as well as their supporting infrastructure. So I just put a chart down there of what's been happening for the past few years. Kind of related to the police recruiting and best practices issue is fleet vehicles and the personal patrol vehicle policy. I asked if there was going to be any change in this and was told no. I wanted to bring to your attention that the signed collective bargaining agreement for 2020 through 2023 has a pilot program that allows officers who live within 15 miles of the county's borders to have take-home PPVs. That's different than what happens today. Only county officers who live in the county can have PPVs, which is their personal vehicle, basically, when they're off as well. Officers who currently live out of the county are assigned what's called a single officer fleet vehicle, and I'm sorry for all the acronyms, that's an SOFV. And they need to leave their car in the county in a secured location when they're off duty and they return to their homes. So this would expand the geographical region where people can have PPVs all the time. That means more mileage, more wear and tear, more maintenance, more repairs, and possibly more traffic crashes. We don't know. They weren't able to give a fiscal estimate of what that would be, but it would be an increase. And perhaps Mr. Drummer will talk more about it when you talk about the FOP's collective bargaining agreement. I wanted to bring it to you primarily for a policy concern at this point. As Mr. Albanaz had mentioned before, it is a best practice to have county officers live in the county where they work in police and interact with the community members. This PPV piece as a fringe benefit actually works to help keep county officers in the county because it's an incentive that they really like to have. On the flip side, if you actually implement this program, it might possibly help with a recruitment effort. So I wanted to put that out there for you to think about. It's something that we could also return to in the fall. But again, I don't see whether or not that pilot program was supposed to be scheduled from July 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. It did not happen because there was a cost associated with it. They just couldn't quantify that. I don't know if they still have plans moving forward.
So we would come back to this, and if we could get this information for when we have the discussion about recruitment, I think that should be a part of that.
Okay. The next piece is the CIP. There's one real amendment, which is the 2nd District Police Station. This is, as you know, that's been built and it's been operating for a couple of years. And then they had to perform environmental remediation on the old 2D site, and that was completed in FY20. The cost change here for this amendment is just showing the decrease in expenditures by $900,000, and that just reflects actual savings. I did want to bring an update on the public safety system modernization to you. There are no cost changes in this one. They do have 2 ongoing sub-projects, the radio system infrastructure project, which you know is the 22-tower microwave-based public safety radio system, which is up and running. They do have one last piece of that, and that's to perform a full foliage test, and that'll occur sometime in mid-May. That'll take about 2 weeks, and we will get you results on that. There's also the records management system is contained in this CIP, which we mentioned earlier in the data discussion. Again, there's no cost change, but those programs, those sub-projects are moving forward. And I did just include, I had asked for a brief overview of crime statistics to help give some perspective on the discussion here, and that's attached to 26 through 34, circles 26 through 34. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things. And, you know, this is a national concern, particularly in larger cities. The nation as a whole has experienced the largest single one-year increase in homicides ever recorded back in 2020. In this county, homicides did increase as well by 14%. That's a pretty significant increase, but it really in actuality reflects that there were 16 homicides in 2020 and there were 14 in 2019. However, this year has been a complete outlier already. And for the first 3 months of 2021, the county experienced 11 homicides compared to the 16 in all of 2020. And I believe we just had another homicide. I don't know if there are additional ones that have occurred in April to increase that number. But if you look just at that increase from this current 3 months of 2021 to the same time last year, it's a 266% increase for the same time period. And again, we touched on carjackings too. There were 19 in 2019 and 36 of them in 2020. The county had already experienced 19 carjackings during the first 3 months, and that's a 533% increase over the same time period last year. After that sharp uptick in carjackings, various law enforcement agencies and state's attorneys agencies in this region created a carjacking task force. And in mid-March, as you know, Chief Jones had announced that the task force had identified and arrested 4 individuals who were involved in multiple carjackings and multiple commercial robberies across the region. And I just indicated it's too early to determine the causes. There are probably multiple causes to these increases in violence. They have several theories that are contributing: diversion of police resources, less policing due to COVID-related issues, large increases in gun sales, as was addressed during the ghost gun legislation that the council just looked at. And again, breakdowns in police and community relations. So I just wanted to summarize council staff recommendations. You haven't voted on each item individually, but the one change that I had recommended, you did not choose to adopt. So you are recommending adoption of the entire operating budget as submitted. I wanted to find out if you were okay with the CIP amendment on the 2nd District Station as submitted. And then I've got several follow-up items that are listed on page 17 that we'll bring back. One of those I will look at more quickly, and that deals with discipline and LEOBR, just like Councilmember Reamer had requested. And that you also wanted to follow up on police hiring, salaries, that type of thing. That's it. So I just want to make sure you are recommending, if you could vote on adopting the budget as recommended by the county executive, and that we will follow up on these multiple issues after budget.
Okay, Councilman Vice President.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, that was a good summary. Yes and yes for me, speaking for myself. But I do really want to revisit the issue of murders in particular. I know that it is a trend nationally. It is alarming. There's been a 400% increase in gun sales in Montgomery County. And so I think it's something that and those are legal gun purchases, but it is something, there's a drive-by shooting this past weekend, as I understand it. And so I would like to do a deeper dive into any trends that we can analyze and see what we can do proactively, because these are obviously devastating to communities, the families who are the most directly impacted, but it has a very significant residual effect, and a terrifying one that we have to be very cautious of. So I would like to revisit that as you recommended anyways. So thank you, Ms. Farag, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So Susan, so I understand, obviously, we voted against the restoring the 9 traffic positions. So what we would be voting on at this point is for everything else with the exception of the 9 traffic positions. Is that correct?
Well, you'd be voting to accept the entire recommended operating budget, the way the executive sent it over. I was the one who had recommended a change.
You're right. You would recommend it.
Right.
I recommended all those. Right.
Yeah.
None of us and Mark, we're all in the same place on that.
You got you. Okay. So we are on the same page. And thank you for clarifying that so that even my mind could figure it out. Okay. So is there a motion, please?
So moved.
And Vice President, you second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the budget, the police budget as sent over by the county executive. Mm-hmm. All those in favor, please raise your hand, and that is 3-0. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Well summarized. Great packet, Susan. Thank you.
Yeah, Susan, you did a great job.
Thank you.
This one was not easy, and we have I think we got you more work just from the packet. I know you're going to really appreciate us, but this is obviously an extremely important topic. So thank you very much, Chief and all. Thank you for being here. And with that, unless there's anything else, we're going to adjourn. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.